A woman who learns to sit comfortably with herself in silence becomes one of the most unpredictable forces in any room. Not because she seeks to dominate, but because she no longer needs to. Silence in a loud, overstimulated world is often misunderstood. It is frequently mistaken for weakness or disengagement. Yet there exists a kind of silence that is not born from repression, but from inner strength. A silence that does not beg to be interpreted because it already knows who it is. This silence is not the lack of words. It is the presence of awareness. It is the stillness that arrives once you stop trying to justify your value. It is the peace that enters when you no longer react to every emotional shift in another person. It is the clarity that surfaces when your inner state is no longer controlled by what someone did or failed to say. Many women are conditioned to overexpress, to overexplain, to constantly provide context for their boundaries until one day they realize that silence itself can be the boundary. When a woman turns inward, not from fear but from conscious choice, she activates a deeper level of respect. Others feel it. They may not be able to articulate it, but they sense it clearly. When you begin to focus on yourself, not through selfishness, but through stillness, everything that is misaligned begins to quietly fall back into place. When a woman truly starts focusing on herself, something profound begins to shift, not only within her, but in the world around her. This shift is not about surface-level self-care rituals or temporary escapes from others. It is a deeper awakening, a quiet decision to stop pouring energy into places that no longer return it, to reclaim attention from everything external and gently redirect it inward. That shift, though subtle in the beginning, transforms everything over time. It often begins with a simple but powerful question: where is my energy going? In a world that constantly demands a woman's attention, her nurturing, her care, her explanations, her flexibility, it becomes easy to forget that energy is finite. Attention is a form of currency, and how you spend it determines the quality of your emotional life. The more you give it away unconsciously, the less remains for yourself. But the moment a woman begins to observe rather than react, to choose herself rather than pursue external validation, she starts to experience a different kind of power. A power that does not come from managing others, but from mastering her inner world. This is not dominance, this is self-possession. Neuroscience has long supported this truth. What you focus on expands. This is known as the Hebbian principle. Neurons that fire together, wire together. When your mind is constantly occupied with fixing people, explaining yourself, anticipating reactions, or worrying about perception, it strengthens pathways of anxiety and over-responsibility. When you begin returning your attention to yourself, your breath, your thoughts, your values, your inner quiet, you start rewiring your brain for clarity, calm, and purpose. Your nervous system learns safety in stillness. Your mind learns discernment instead of urgency. Your emotions begin to stabilize. Consider the story of Mina, a woman in her late 50s who spent most of her adult life adjusting herself around others. As a mother, a wife, and later a caretaker for aging parents, she learned to anticipate needs before they were voiced. Her worth became tied to usefulness. When her children moved out and her caregiving roles ended, she was left alone with silence. At first, it frightened her. The constant noise of other people's needs had guided her for so long that she felt lost without it. Silence felt like emptiness. Stillness felt unfamiliar. Slowly, she began asking herself new questions. What do I feel when no one is watching? What do I want when I am not needed? She started with small choices: morning walks without her phone, journaling without censoring herself, saying no without attaching explanations or guilt. As her attention returned to herself, something powerful emerged. She no longer felt scattered in multiple directions. Her conversations became more deliberate. She stopped responding to emotional manipulation with lengthy explanations and instead offered calm, grounded silence. To her surprise, people began treating her differently. Not because she demanded respect, but because she embodied it. Her presence changed, her energy shifted. Focusing on yourself is not abandoning others. It is anchoring within yourself so you do not disappear inside other people. It is learning to stay whole while staying connected. You begin to recognize your own patterns, where you overextend, where you seek approval, where you override your intuition to preserve harmony. Each time you notice, you interrupt an old cycle. That moment of noticing is power, awareness turning into conscious choice. There is a sacred discipline in remembering yourself before remembering everyone else. It means asking before every yes, whether it is rooted in fear or integrity. It means pausing before reacting and asking, is this worth my energy? Does this align with who I am becoming? This path is not easy, especially for women conditioned to equate worth with service, silence with weakness, and boundaries with rejection. Yet the truth is often the opposite. A woman who focuses on herself is not selfish. She is self-aware, and self-awareness is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Without self-awareness, we perform roles instead of showing up authentically. We absorb moods that are not ours. We mirror dysfunctions. We confuse emotional over-availability with love. But when we are centered within ourselves, we can distinguish between what belongs to us and what does not. We stop taking everything personally. We stop rescuing people from lessons they need to learn on their own. One of the most misunderstood aspects of this journey is the practice of silence. Not the silence of avoidance or punishment, but the silence of presence. This is a deliberate, grounded quiet that listens more than it speaks, that observes without rushing to fix, that chooses stillness over unnecessary reaction. In this kind of silence, a woman becomes untouchable, not because she is distant, but because she is anchored. There is something undeniably powerful about a woman who does not rush to fill empty space. In conflict, she does not need to raise her voice to be acknowledged. In relationships, she does not over-explain to justify her needs. Her calm becomes her authority. Her silence becomes her boundary. Silence offers something words often cannot: perspective. From a physiological standpoint, silence activates the parasympathetic nervous system responsible for rest, regulation, and insight. Reactivity keeps us in fight or flight, narrowing perception and clouding judgment. Silence restores access to clarity and wisdom. It allows us to see situations as they are, not as our fears distort them. Jasmine, a mid-career professional in her 40s, learned this through experience. She was accustomed to defending herself in every interaction, trying to be understood by people who had already decided who she was. Whenever someone questioned her intentions or dismissed her emotions, she would immediately explain, justify, or argue. It drained her. Then one day, during a heated moment with her partner, she paused. She said nothing, not from defeat, but from awareness. She realized her peace was not something to negotiate. The silence that followed carried more weight than any argument she could have offered. It unsettled him, not because she intended harm, but because she no longer made herself emotionally available for conflict. She stayed present, steady, and composed. That moment shifted the dynamic of their relationship, not instantly, but permanently. He began to listen. She began to feel stronger, not because he changed, but because she did. Often we believe we must speak more to be seen. Sometimes speaking less is what makes us visible. Silence is not the loss of voice. It is the embodiment of strength. It communicates what explanations cannot. That you are no longer afraid of being misunderstood. That you do not fear disconnection because you are deeply connected to yourself. Your worth is no longer tied to agreeableness, but to authenticity. There is deep wisdom in knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. Not from fear, but from freedom. Not from suppression, but from sovereignty. When words are no longer used to control outcomes, truth reveals itself naturally. People expose themselves in your silence. Their intentions surface. Their values become clear. You no longer need to interrogate or convince. You simply observe. From that inner stillness, decisions become cleaner. Boundaries become easier. Direction becomes clear. In relationships, this awareness is transformative. When a woman focuses on herself and practices intentional silence, she begins to notice patterns that once went unseen. She sees who thrives on chaos, who expects emotional labor without reciprocity, who confuses connection with control. Most importantly, she sees her own participation, not with shame, but with responsibility. Every moment of silence becomes a mirror, and what appears in that reflection may be uncomfortable. Patterns of over-explaining, chasing closure, or offering endless chances out of loneliness may surface. But once seen clearly, they lose their power. Awareness dissolves repetition. Stillness interrupts cycles. And from that place, a woman no longer reacts to life. She responds from choice. You begin to act with intention rather than react on impulse. And that single shift changes everything. This path does not require isolation or withdrawal from the world, but it does ask you to stop abandoning yourself. It invites you to slow down long enough to ask, who am I without the noise? Who am I when I am not performing? And what emotions surface when I am no longer distracted? Silence creates the space for these questions to rise. It reveals the inner structure of your life, the values, beliefs, habits, and unhealed places that quietly shape your relationships. And once these patterns are seen clearly, they can be healed, reshaped, and realigned. One of the most powerful realizations a woman can have is this: not everything requires your energy. Not every message needs a reply. Not every misunderstanding deserves clarification. Not every question warrants an answer. The moment you understand that your presence alone is enough, you begin to protect your energy for what truly matters. This kind of self-focus is not a destination you arrive at once. It is a daily practice, a return again and again to the present moment, to the breath, to the truth that you do not need to chase what is aligned with you. What is meant for you responds to alignment, not pursuit. And so the silence continues, not as a way of escaping the world, but as a deeper way of engaging with it, with clarity instead of confusion, with discernment instead of urgency, with grace instead of force. A woman who focuses on herself and embraces silence does not disappear. She becomes more visible than ever, not through noise, but through essence. And the world, sensing that shift, begins to rearrange itself around her. A woman who learns to master her emotions is not merely in control. She is free. Free from the grip of overreaction. Free from repeating cycles of regret. free from patterns that once dictated her responses without consent. Emotional sovereignty is not about being unfeeling or distant. It is about not being owned by every passing emotion. It is knowing you can feel deeply and still respond wisely. You can experience hurt and still act from alignment. You can feel love, grief, anger, confusion, and yet remain anchored in your values. Many people believe emotions must either be expressed immediately or suppressed entirely. Both extremes create imbalance. One makes you a prisoner of reaction, the other disconnects you from your inner truth. True emotional power lives in the space between impulse and restraint. It is the practiced ability to feel everything without being consumed by anything. This is not numbness, this is mastery. Ancient Eastern teachings say that when you control your breath, you control your life. Modern neuroscience confirms this wisdom. When a woman pauses and breathes consciously before responding to provocation, her brain shifts from the amygdala, where emotional reactivity originates, to the prefrontal cortex, where reflection, logic, and discernment reside. This is not symbolic advice. It is biological fact. The breath becomes a bridge between feeling and choice. Consider the story of Ea, a woman long known for her fire. When someone crossed a boundary, she met them with intensity. Her voice sharpened, her pulse quickened. She defended herself fiercely, proving her intelligence, her strength, her refusal to be dismissed. And yet, even when she won the argument, she walked away depleted. She began to realize that her reactions, though justified, were costing her more than the original offense. They were draining her peace, her clarity, her power. One day, during a tense exchange with a colleague who had undermined her work in a meeting, she felt the familiar surge rising. The urge to respond immediately, to correct, to defend herself publicly. But something shifted. She inhaled slowly, and instead of reacting, she paused. She looked at him and said nothing. That pause, only a few seconds long, was not empty. It was full of restraint, full of grounded energy, full of quiet authority. In that pause, she recognized something vital. The need to prove yourself often grows from the fear of being unseen. But when you truly know your worth, you no longer need to perform it for others. You carry it quietly, and the world learns to feel it without explanation. The pause gave her time to assess. Was this moment worth her emotional investment? Did this person truly have the power to define her value? The answer was no. When she finally spoke, her words were calm and clear. Her boundary was firm, not built on fire, but on foundation. The result surprised her. He backed down, not because she overpowered him, but because she was anchored. She had stepped into emotional sovereignty. To be emotionally sovereign means your inner state is no longer controlled by other people's moods, decisions, or expectations. You stop outsourcing your peace. You stop being available for every emotional tug of war. You do not become cold or closed. You become clear, and clarity is what protects you from the trap of reaction. Every time you react without reflection, you give your power away. You allow someone else to set the rhythm of your nervous system. But when you pause, when you breathe, when you choose rather than react, you reclaim authorship over your inner world. You decide how you show up. You decide what deserves your energy. This is especially important in intimate relationships, where emotional triggers are deeply rooted. Partners often mirror each other's unhealed wounds. One person's insecurity feeds the other's defensiveness. One person's silence triggers another's fear of abandonment. One person's need for control clashes with another's need for freedom. Without emotional sovereignty, these patterns spiral into conflict, misunderstanding, and resentment. With awareness, they become opportunities for growth. Sophia, a woman in her late 30s, once shared how nearly every argument with her partner ended the same way. She cried, raised her voice, or walked away in anger. She felt unseen, invalidated, emotionally exhausted. But when she committed to a daily practice of breathwork and emotional journaling, something slowly changed. The next time conflict arose, she noticed her body before her words, the tightness in her chest, the clench in her jaw, the quick, shallow breath. Instead of reacting, she said, "Give me a moment." She stepped away, not to escape, but to return to herself. She sat, she breathed. She asked not only what she felt, but why she felt it. Was it about him or something older, deeper? When she returned, she spoke from a calmer place, not from the storm, but from the center of it. The conversation that followed was the first in months that did not end in emotional chaos. It was not perfect, but it was present, and presence changed everything. Emotional sovereignty is not achieved through force or control. It is cultivated through daily attention, through the practice of awareness, through the discipline of radical self-honesty. It is built in quiet moments when no one is watching, moments where you choose to observe rather than indulge the story. You choose to breathe instead of blame, to inquire instead of accuse. This presence does more than improve your relationships with others, it transforms your relationship with yourself. You begin to trust yourself again. You stop second-guessing every decision. You no longer need to crowdsource your worth or use someone else's affection as proof of your value. You carry yourself with a quiet assurance that says, "I know who I am, I know what I feel, and I will not abandon myself for comfort or approval." This naturally leads into another profound shift, the power of embodied stillness. A woman's emotional mastery is not expressed only through her words or her silence. It radiates through her presence, through how she moves, how she sits, how she breathes, how she listens, and how she holds herself when no one else is holding her. The body is not merely a vessel, it is a language. It tells others how to treat you before you speak. Posture, tone, eye contact. These are not small details. They are energetic signals. They communicate whether you are grounded or scattered, open or guarded, calm or reactive. When a woman enters a room with presence, she does not announce her strength. It is felt. This is not the presence that demands attention. It is the presence that holds attention. And it does not come from performing confidence. It comes from cultivating internal alignment. Imagine Maya, a soft-spoken woman often overlooked in work meetings. Her ideas were thoughtful and well-formed, but she shared them hesitantly. Eyes downcast, voice uncertain, shoulders slightly collapsed. She did not realize her body was communicating doubt even when her words were sound. After attending a somatic awareness workshop, she began a simple daily practice. Each morning, she stood barefoot for 5 minutes. She breathed deeply, rolled her shoulders back, grounded her feet into the floor. Over time, something shifted. She was not becoming someone new. She was returning to herself, fully inhabiting her body. Her voice steadied. Her presence expanded. The next time she spoke in a meeting, people listened, not because she spoke louder, but because she spoke from her center. Her body affirmed what her words carried. "I believe in what I am saying." And because she believed it, others did too. This is the quiet power of embodied stillness. You do not need to shout to be heard. You do not need to push to be taken seriously. You need to be aligned internally and externally. Through breath, posture, and presence, your stillness becomes your strength. These are not fleeting wellness trends or passing philosophies. They are foundational practices for women who want to move through life with clarity, dignity, and self-respect. The breath in particular is a tool that is often underestimated. It serves as the bridge between mind and body, between thought and action, between reaction and conscious response. In moments of emotional intensity, a single, slow, intentional breath can alter the entire direction of a conversation. Conscious breathing retrains the body's stress response and gently signals the nervous system, I am safe, I am present, I can choose wisely. Over time, this retraining becomes second nature. You are no longer pulled by external chaos. You move from your center, and that center becomes your compass, especially when others attempt to draw you into storms you did not create. Embodied stillness also cultivates patience. In a culture driven by urgency and immediacy, a woman who moves deliberately, who responds only after reflection, who does not rush to fix or justify herself, becomes intriguing. Not because she withholds, but because she offers only what is aligned. Her yes is intentional. Her no is steady. Her time is protected. This presence does not repel others. It invites honesty. It creates a relational space where authenticity is the only thing that can survive. People sense when you are truly present, not only physically, but energetically. They feel safer around you, not because you accommodate them, but because you are not in conflict with yourself. This inner harmony creates emotional safety in relationships. When your presence is grounded, your partner no longer feels the need to decode your moods, manage your reactions, or anticipate emotional shifts. You create consistency not through passivity, but through internal alignment. Children feel this as well. A mother who is emotionally sovereign and embodied teaches far more through her being than through instruction. She demonstrates how to remain present during discomfort, how to pause in moments of tension, how to breathe through overwhelm. That lived example becomes an inheritance far more valuable than advice or discipline. Living this way requires intention. It does not happen automatically. It must be practiced and chosen daily. Yet the reward is immeasurable. Relationships mature, decisions become clearer. Energy deepens rather than scatters. You become a quiet force, not for control, but for peace. Not for attention, but for alignment. Not to prove, but simply to be. And in that state of being, others are affected, not by what you perform, but by who you are. Because you are no longer reacting to life, you are responding from inner truth. And that truth becomes the most powerful presence in the room. Every woman carries an inner rhythm, an energetic signal that precedes her words and even her actions. Before she speaks, before she responds, before she even enters a space, there is a subtle transmission. It is quiet yet unmistakable. It is her emotional frequency. The reality is that people do not only hear what you say, they feel who you are. The mirror effect teaches that relationships are reflections. What we hold within ourselves is projected outward. What we avoid internally often appears externally through the people we attract, the conflicts we repeat, the silences we endure, and even the love we accept. When there is inner disarray, chaos seems to find us no matter how much we resist it. But when there is inner peace, the external world begins to soften, not because life changes, but because our relationship with it does. Imagine a woman carrying unresolved grief. She may appear composed and smile in public, yet her energy carries weight. Without realizing it, she may attract emotionally unavailable partners, mirroring her own disconnection. Or consider a woman burdened by self-doubt. She may speak affirmations aloud, but her energy quietly communicates uncertainty. As a result, her boundaries are tested, her voice overlooked, her confidence questioned. This is not about blame, it is about awareness. The mirror effect is not punishment, it is revelation. Life continues to show us through others what still needs our attention within. When a woman begins to center herself in truth, not performance, not fear, but honesty, everything becomes clearer. Not easier, but clearer. One woman shared how she repeatedly found herself in relationships where she felt used. Each partner seemed attentive at first, only to later become distant, controlling, or indifferent. Initially, she blamed them. Then she blamed herself. Through deeper reflection, she uncovered a subconscious belief that her worth was transactional, that love had to be earned through effort. She overgave, overexplained, and overextended, hoping for crumbs of affection. Her energy whispered, "Please see me," even when her words said, "I'm fine." When she stopped trying to fix others and turned inward, something shifted. She spent more time in silence. She listened to her breath. She observed her emotional patterns without judgment. She no longer tried to be liked. She chose honesty. She slowed intimacy. She watched people instead of chasing them. And she realized something profound. As she became emotionally consistent with herself, manipulation lost its grip. Chaos stopped finding her. Her stillness became a filter. The mirror effect does not only expose what is wounded, it also reveals what is possible. When your inner world is ordered, nourished, and aligned, your relationships begin reflecting that harmony. This is not mysticism, it is resonance. We draw into our lives those who operate at a similar emotional frequency. As we elevate our own, not by pretending, but by healing, our surroundings respond. People begin to respect your silence because they can feel its intention. They sense your no before it is spoken. They feel your joy not because you display it, but because it resides within you. You begin to understand that being centered is the strongest protection you can have. It shields you not with barriers, but with presence. This is why inner work is not optional. It is foundational. A woman who invests in her internal world, who examines her beliefs, clears her energy, and continually returns to herself, builds a life that reflects peace. She no longer begs for connection, she becomes connection. She no longer performs for love, she embodies it. And from that embodiment, she attracts those capable of meeting her. In romance, in friendship, in family, in community. Inner alignment requires discipline. It asks you to pause before reacting, to walk away from what disturbs your peace even when it is familiar, to face uncomfortable truths rather than escape into distraction. But the reward is clarity. You begin trusting yourself again. You stop questioning your intuition. You no longer tolerate draining energy because alignment makes pretense impossible. Even in solitude, you feel connected because you are no longer searching externally for what you now generate internally. That shift changes everything. It is the difference between chasing and attracting, between noise and resonance, between being pulled in countless directions and standing firmly in one. Still, life will test this alignment. There will always be those who misunderstand your silence, feel threatened by your presence, or attempt to pull you back into old dynamics. In those moments, you face a choice. Contract yourself to keep others comfortable or expand to remain true. Sometimes the most powerful action is to step back, not from resentment, but from realignment. This is strategic withdrawal. It is the conscious choice to create distance in order to observe, to allow truth to reveal itself, not through confrontation, but through space. There is a saying that when you stop speaking, people show you who they are. This is not poetry, it is psychology. When you stop feeding a dynamic, you expose its core. When you stop explaining, you discover who genuinely wants to understand. When you stop initiating, you see who values connection enough to reach out. Distance has a language. Silence carries clarity. Strategic withdrawal is not about disappearing or manipulation. It is about reclaiming emotional energy from places where it is being depleted. It gives you the space to see reality as it is, not as you hope it will become. We often remain too long in situations because we are attached to potential. We fall in love with who someone could be while ignoring who they are. But potential is not a promise. Silence allows us to stop projecting and begin perceiving. Amira, a woman caught for years in an on-again, off-again relationship, eventually chose silence. Not out of bitterness, but wisdom. She had tried everything: conversations, letters, counseling, compromise. Yet the cycle repeated. Stepping back was not giving up. It was choosing clarity over confusion, alignment over attachment, and truth over hope. Each time she explained her needs, they were acknowledged in words but never honored in action. So one day, she stopped explaining. She didn't issue ultimatums. She didn't argue her case. She simply became quiet. That silence became her boundary. And within that quiet, she could finally hear her own voice again. Not the anxious voice that whispered, "Make it work," but the deeper, steadier voice that said, "Let it go." Within weeks, the truth of the relationship became unmistakable. Not because he transformed, but because she did. Her clarity sharpened, her confusion dissolved, and from that clarity, peace naturally followed. Withdrawal was not weakness. It was wisdom. It allowed her energy to recalibrate. It revealed who was willing to meet her where she truly stood. It filtered out the noise so her intuition could speak clearly again. Most importantly, it taught her something essential. She was never meant to carry a relationship alone. A woman who knows when to step back is a woman who knows her worth. She is not afraid of solitude because she is not empty within herself. She does not fear silence because silence is where her truth speaks most clearly. She does not chase answers because she trusts that the right questions will bring them in time. There is a powerful shift that occurs when you stop trying to force outcomes. You begin to trust the unfolding of life. You start to see how much energy you once spent trying to make others understand, trying to make them care, trying to make them stay. And in releasing that effort, you reclaim that energy for your own evolution, your own healing, your own joy. Some people will call this selfish. Let them. They have never experienced the kind of self-respect that comes from refusing to abandon yourself. Others may label you distant, but what they are truly sensing is your energetic boundary, the sacred space you now protect. When you withdraw not as punishment, but as protection, you create room for clarity to breathe. And clarity is what guides wise action. Clarity tells you when to stay, when to leave, when to speak, and when to let silence carry the message. It teaches you that your presence is not something to offer carelessly. It is a gift, a sacred force, and it must be shared only where it is valued. A woman who practices strategic withdrawal becomes magnetic, not because she is mysterious, but because she is whole. People are drawn to her stillness, her integrity, her grounded strength, yet not everyone will be ready for it. And that is not a problem. She no longer lives to be understood by everyone. She lives to be honest with herself. From that honesty, everything else begins to align, not always immediately. not always without resistance, but always with intention. Life has a way of supporting those who walk in alignment. It clears paths for the woman who is brave enough to stand alone when necessary and wise enough to know when to return. This is the quiet wisdom that speaks louder than noise, the calm presence that resonates more deeply than performance, the steadiness that, once chosen, does not easily fade. When a woman chooses to focus on herself and embraces silence not as emptiness but as intention, her life begins to shift in meaningful ways. Not because she demands change, but because she becomes it. She no longer reacts from old wounds. She responds from inner knowing. She does not beg to be heard. Her stillness carries her message. She no longer pours into what drains her. She protects her energy for what aligns with her growth, her peace, and her truth. This journey is not loud, it is not dramatic, it is quiet, consistent, and deeply powerful. She learns to look beyond appearances, to sense the energy beneath words, and to walk away from noise disguised as love. Her presence becomes her statement. Her boundaries become her safeguard. Her silence becomes her filter. And slowly, the outer world begins to reflect her inner world. Relationships grow more respectful. Opportunities arise without pursuit. Clarity replaces confusion. Not because she fixed everything outside herself, but because she mastered what lived within. The woman who learns to be still, to remain present, to stay rooted in her own truth is no longer available for anything less than what honors her. In her silence, what is unnecessary naturally falls away, and in that open space, everything meaningful finds its way to her.